You also have a pal named Jackson
Oropesa.
Oropesa, and he's a Dominican boy who is queer. He seems to pal around with Danny all the time. Francine sort of becomes part of their trio, and there's some amusing scenes where Francine is talking uh, about dating and at the time about some of the racial prejudices and biases that people had. But they're not in the sort of the glorified, uh, pathetic manner that most of these approaches would take.
Well, it's just at that time there was the Atlanta child murders and yellow ribbons around, and there was cop cars that had to separate the kids on the black bus from the white bus from the Hispanic bus. And the Jackson character is based again on a real kid who was part of that little trio, and I had 2 or 3 classes with both of them, and we always sat together. And Fran sat in front of me, and I remember when she'd come in the classes, she was the only girl in that whole goddamn school that didn't wear jeans. She actually wore dresses, and God, I loved her legs. And she was right in front of me, and I'd smell her. And we had the math teacher there, and there's a few scenes where Danny's being chivalrous towards her, and it's a much more direct play, but I think you get a sense of it's it is like I said, it was a choice to, instead of having that Bergmanian complexity in the Charlotte play, it was a choice to go much more simple in this play, and I think it's the right choice since I didn't know really Fran even as much as I knew the Charlotte character.
You also have a few instances where the Danny character elaborates on this into the scene how he can't really be fixated because as he's aged, he can't admire her the same way that the younger Danny would.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's part of a healthy sexuality that you don't end up as a pedophile. Pedophiles are arrested sexually; they never grow up. And what the interesting thing is that has negative consequences. Now, whether we're talking homosexuality or bisexuality or transgenderism or whatnot, these things, whether or not you want to talk about biological influences or genetic influences or whatnot on any of these things, there's nothing inherently uh, deviant in the sense that it's hurting another person. But if, like I said, if I'm 55 and I was lusting for 15-year-old girls, that's fucked up. I mean, I can look at women twice at age 30, and I'm like, I can't even really think of most of them. I mean, yes, if they had Jessica's talent, I could probably convince myself to be attracted to a woman in 20 years younger than me. But and there were some pretty young girls that I work with at the store, but I feel fatherly towards them. I saw this young girl that I work with. I hadn't seen her for 3 or 4 weeks. I thought she quit the store. And when I saw her, I said, "Oh, you're still working here? I was thinking about you." She came and she gave me a hug. She's this cute little blonde girl who, if I was going to have a daughter, I'd like a daughter like her. And, but for me to think of having sex with someone like that, it's just, ugh. And it's not because she's not a cute girl, but it's like I think I say in the play, it's like turning the telescope around and looking through
Mhm.
the wrong end
Yes.
of the telescope. And so, in order for me to even write about the young Danny, I have to, in my mind, put myself back and sort of shrink because I'm like uh, a yeast that's just risen and risen, and so now I'm the size. It's like I'm a muffin that's the size of a room, but I have to get back to a regular muffin size to be 15 years old again, and it's difficult in some ways, but I mean I've done it before, so it's not that difficult for me. But most people can't do it. Most artists cannot go most artists can't get into other characters, which is a major problem, much less back into a character that was themselves. uh, but I'm someone who has great empathy, and I can do that, and I can remember what it's like. I can remember these things. And there's another funny scene with the computer Jews, and then there's my favorite scene is the one where Jackson, this big tall black kid from the Dominican Republic, can't even dribble a ball. He doesn't even know what the word dribble is. And that's true. He was a total spastic. I mean, not that I'm a great athlete, but I could have killed him in basketball if we ever played. And he didn't know how to. And then there's a scene where there's the football player who's calling Fran a nigger and whatnot, and Danny stands up for her. There's this like little turdy white kid called Grunk that's there, and it in a sense this is
That interaction too is interesting too, in that he says later that he's going to get him, but you never, it never ends itself. It ends on that ambiguity.
yeah.
Whether he went after you again.
Well, yeah, he never did, the real life kid, but um, the fact, and here's a connection with some of the earlier prose fiction that I wrote is, I write in true life about some of the guards in the school. And here I have a couple of the guards, black guys from, I guess, Jamaica or wherever they were from, and they chase off this kid and whatnot. But I mean, overall, it's a play that I enjoy. But yeah, it is a simpler play, and this is a good kind of lesson is that you can't, nor should you, even if you could, always want to do bigger and better, because if you're doing that, it's like falling into this Hollywood blockbuster movie mode. That we had 87 explosions in Bill fucks Bob #1. So by Bill fucks Bob #10, we have to have 254 explosions. For what? For what purpose? Sometimes you have to go laterally sideways. Sometimes you have to shrink down to get to something because the story or the characters, what you want to tell, demands that. And you shouldn't be afraid to do something smaller. When I did, for example, a Norwegian in the Family, the very next book I did was 64, which was radically, totally different style, which was only less than 100,000 words. 1/26th the length of a Norwegian in the Family, but that was the right way to approach ending up the New York Quartet.
How do you take some of these scenes? Jessica and I were talking about Experiment in Terror, the Blake Edwards film, which is sort of an odd film to think of his when he was mostly famed for the Pink Panther films. But it's an excellent film noir. And you use part of those scenes in Norwegian. I notice you take scenes from cinema and you twist them in such a way. Could you explain that difference? And then there's also there's plenty of scenes when you can see people taking influence. It sort of takes away from it, especially if it's a great thing. But you seem to take some of these even lesser components and just top them in that scene. I think in Norwegian, the scene that begins Experiment in Terror with the asthmatic stalker, it's used as a scene for Carla Marlowe.
Yeah, her death, and so yeah, and I just aesthetically, I thought it was a good thing. Big Frank is waiting for Carla. He's going to kill her. It's part of his plan. He's just killed off. I think he's just come back. I think in the book he has killed. The book ends with him killing Paula's current lover and the kid, and then rowing back. But the later scene actually takes place earlier in the book, in where he just basically kills Carla. And I wanted to do that scene because I'm so sick and tired of these babes in heel things where 120-pound Scarlett Johansson, in a bikini and heels can kick to the groin or whatnot and disable a 250-pound linebacker. I mean, it's so ridiculous. 99 times out of 100, even though I'm 20 years older, I'll kick Scarlett Johansson's ass. Yeah, one time she'll get that lucky shot to the balls and get me. But even I, who's not a big Hulk. So I wanted to do that particular scene. I wanted to sort of dismiss that myth. But I wanted to have it that she doesn't know who it is. And it's not until she sees Big Frank. And then Big Frank just, I think he punches her right in the nose and just pushes the nose back in her face and she dies. And we don't get that level of violence in that film, which is like 62, I think it was 63, Experiment in Terror. But the whole and Big Frank is maybe tired because he's rowed and whatnot, or maybe he's doing it for effect to throw her off. But it's at the end of that huge novel, not at the beginning of a film. It's for a different purpose. These two characters know each other intimately, and they've been co-conspirators in some things. And so there's a whole different dynamic. but that's what works. And so, it's obvious to anyone who's well versed in film and literature that that's where I took it from. Even though Experiment in Terror is a criminally underrated film, it's not a great film in the way Bergman's best, but it's a really good, I guess you'd call it a neo noir film.
The
From
important thing, though, I think to take from that is that it doesn't depend on that influence.
right,
Jessica read it and didn't know that it came from Experiment in Terror because she
yeah,
hadn't seen it yet.
yeah,
But it still worked in that moment.
yeah.
Um, she also said that it was sort of like a genre high and low, and